Welcome to the GCSAA edition of the Turfgrass Report. I'm your show host, Turfgrass Specialist Alec Kowaleski. I have a wonderful show planned for you today, an interview with Dr. Clint Mattox, who has been exploring alternatives to traditional fungicides at Oregon State University. Dr. Mattox, please wave to our audience members. Great. So, with no further ado, let's get started. Dr. Mattox, you're from Indiana. I have heard there is a tree in Milltown, Indiana covered in shoes. It is believed that Larry Bird hung some shoes from this tree years ago, and numerous others have added since. Some golfers believe that shoes and golf clubs spread high golf scores and turfgrass pathogens, and consider adding these items to the Larry Bird tree after every round. Considering this, what cultural practices have you come across that help prevent the development and spread of cool weather turfgrass pathogens like Microdochium patch?
Yeah, great question, and thanks for having me on the show. It does seem like Microdochium nivale is a fungal pathogen that can infect turfgrass, and it can spread really easily, making nice stripes and even star-shaped patterns on greens. Very likely can be transferred with golf shoes, such as by transferring clippings and maybe potentially even spores, although there's little research to look into that so far. But as you can see, we're in a really cool and humid climate here in Western Oregon, and I don't know, giving up my golf shoes, these FootJoys I've had for such a long time, that's going to be hard to convince me to do. And in addition, whenever we do our turfgrass research here at Oregon State, we always beat up the turf so it's really close to what you'd see in real life by walking over the plots a lot. And so, it may be good business for some shoe companies out in Oregon, but it doesn't seem very practical to be throwing shoes away. So one thing we did look at is all this dew that's on these greens in this cool and humid climate. One thing we found was that rolling did a really good job at suppressing Microdochium patch, especially when we were doing it as a dew removal technique, while rolling the greens in back and forth 5 days a week. It was a little bit better than brushing and doing other techniques. So I'd recommend rolling as a dew removal cultural practice if I was trying to mitigate Microdochium patch.
Excellent. So let's move on to your next question. About 7 years ago, you lived in France. Here you were a superintendent for 5 years. France is home to 400 different kinds of cheese. It is illegal to throw food in France, which I find strange because there are 400 different kinds of cheese which you could potentially throw at someone. It is also illegal to kiss on a train platform in France and make repeated pesticide applications on a golf course, which is why you moved to Oregon to research fungicide alternatives. So tell us more about the Microdochium patch fungicide alternative research you've been doing.
Yeah, great question. And thanks for bringing up the fact that I moved to Oregon to work on turfgrass diseases and not so I could kiss people on train platforms. Although I think that throwing food probably isn't legal in Oregon either. So some things that I was working on when I arrived at Oregon State University was, nothing really new. I've been working on stuff that other turfgrass researchers had previously found. Such as, for example, I was looking at sulfur, which Dr. Gossip at Washington State University had already shown could suppress Microdochium patch. We also looked at phosphorus acid or phosphites, which Dr. John Dempsey out of England was able to suppress Microdochium patch. One thing that was truly unique about some of the research we were doing is we were trying to use a lot of different things in combination with each other. For example, we found that sulfur combined with phosphorus acid was able to suppress disease better than either product alone. Similar results were found when we used the mineral oil Civitas Turf Defense in combination with phosphorus acid, where that additive effect was able to suppress disease better than either product alone. In addition, we've done a lot of research using iron sulfate in combination with phosphorus acid, where we could find better disease suppression when combining the two products. This was allowing us to find different rates of iron sulfate, perhaps lower rates, that would suppress disease without darkening the turf and leading to turfgrass quality that was a little bit better. It's still a little bit harsh to put iron sulfate on golf course putting greens because they're such sensitive sites, but these could be good technique for a tee or an approach or perhaps a fairway. So we're pretty happy about that.
That is quite enlightening. So let's move to our third and final question. Oregon is currently your home, Dr. Mattox. Oregon is home to the largest cheese factory in the world. Oregon is also home to the Trysting Tree, which quite literally means kissing tree golf course, which would be more appropriate for a French kiss than a train platform. Oregon golf courses with annual bluegrass putting greens, like the Trysting Tree golf course, are susceptible to summer pathogens like anthracnose. So what fungicide alternative methods have you researched for anthracnose control?
Yeah, that's a great question. And thank you so much for, talking about shoes, cheese, and kissing throughout this very short interview. Some things that are really interesting with our research looking at anthracnose is really tied to Microdochium patch. When we were looking at that dew removal trial, one of the techniques we had used was to use a surfactant or a wetting agent multiple times at a pretty high rate. And what we found was that surfactant, when it was applied throughout the wintertime, was able to suppress the anthracnose that occurred in the late spring of the following year. And so this was really interesting research, and we've been working on it quite a bit ever since. And so we're pretty excited about the ability to use surfactants to suppress anthracnose on annual bluegrass putting greens.
That was an excellent interview, Dr. Mattox, and I would like to thank you for being part of the Turfgrass Report. Back to you, Tom.